The first crack in everything did not happen the night of the party. It happened months before, in a kitchen that always smelled faintly of cinnamon and lemon polish, in a house that had been preserved like a museum of almost and if-onlys. I just didn't recognize it at the time. I was standing at the stove in that kitchen, stirring a pot of tomato soup, while my mother polished the already gleaming granite countertops, the late autumn sun spilling through the narrow windows in streaks of gold. Outside, the maple tree in the yard had begun shedding its leaves, scattering red and orange across the grass like confetti from some quiet celebration no one attended. Inside, the air was heavy with unspoken judgment. My fiancé, though he wasn't my fiancé yet then, Noah had just left after spending the afternoon helping my father fix the garage door. He laughed easily, wiped grease on an old rag, and thanked my dad for teaching him something new. When he left, he kissed my cheek and whispered, "Call me when you get home safe." It was simple, steady love, the kind that doesn't try to dazzle you, the kind that feels like warm hands around cold fingers. My mother watched him drive away from the window without saying a word, her reflection hovering in the glass beside the fading sun, her mouth pressed into that thin line I had come to recognize as disapproval disguised as thoughtfulness. "He's nice," she said finally, and the pause before the word stretched like a fault line. I smiled because I was used to translating her language. Nice meant insufficient. Nice meant safe. Nice meant not enough. What she didn't say hung between us. He isn't extraordinary. He isn't impressive. He isn't the life you could have. I had been with Noah for 3 years by then. 3 steady, unremarkable, beautiful years. He worked as a project coordinator for a regional construction firm. He wore flannel shirts and steel-toed boots during the week and soft gray sweaters on weekends. He remembered my coffee order and the way I liked the blanket folded at the foot of the bed. He was not flashy. He was not wealthy. He was not the kind of man my mother had once paraded in front of her friends with proud, glittering eyes. That man had been Julian. Julian with his tailored suits and inherited confidence. Julian whose family owned boutique hotels along the coast, whose mother wore diamonds to casual brunches, whose laughter always sounded like he was on a private joke about the rest of us. I had dated Julian from 19 to 24, years that now felt like a fevered dream wrapped in silk. In the beginning, he had been intoxicating. The rooftop dinners overlooking city lights. The weekends at beach houses that smelled of salt and imported candles. My mother had adored him. She'd introduce him as our future son-in-law. Before we'd even talked about moving in together, she'd tell her friends how lucky I was, how some girls had to settle, but I had found someone with vision. What she never saw, or refused to see, was a quiet unraveling behind closed doors. The messages from women saved under fake names. The lies delivered with practiced calm. The way he could look into my eyes and convince me I was imagining things. I spent the last year of that relationship doubting my instincts, apologizing for questions that were entirely justified. When the truth finally surfaced, screenshots sent anonymously, hotel receipts that didn't match his stories, it felt less like heartbreak and more like waking from hypnosis. I told my mother everything, every humiliating detail. She listened, but her sympathy was thin, stretched over something harder. "People make mistakes," she said, "especially when they're young. As if betrayal were a rite of passage. As if wealth could sand down the edges of dishonesty. When Noah came into my life, it was quieter. We met at a mutual friend's game night. He spilled soda on the table and laughed at himself. He asked questions and actually listened to the answers. There were no rooftop views, no champagne flutes. There were long walks under streetlights, shared pizzas, conversations that meandered into the early hours of morning. Loving him felt like exhaling after years of holding my breath. But my mother never exhaled. She observed. She compared. She remembered Julian's polish, his pedigree, the way doors seemed to open for him automatically. Noah had to push them himself. The night Noah proposed was simple and almost private. We were visiting his grandmother in a small coastal town where the air always smelled like brine and old wood. The house creaked in the wind, and the porch light flickered softly against the darkening sky. He asked me to step outside just as the sun dipped beneath the horizon, painting the water in shades of molten copper. He didn't kneel immediately. He looked at me first, really looked at me as if memorizing the moment. Then he knelt on weathered boards and opened a small velvet box. The ring was modest, delicate, a cluster of tiny diamonds set in white gold. My heart pounded so loudly I barely heard the waves. "I don't have everything figured out," he said, voice steady despite the tremor in his hands. "But I know I want to figure out with you." I said yes before he finished the sentence. It felt inevitable, like saying yes to gravity. We called my parents that night. My father whooped with joy. My mother's congratulations came after 2 weeks later. She insisted on hosting an engagement celebration at her house. "A proper one," she said, "with everyone." I hesitated. There was something in her tone, too bright, too determined. But Noah squeezed my hand and told me maybe this was her way of trying. So I agreed. The weeks leading up to the party were a blur of texts about floral arrangements and catering menus. She sent photos of table settings, asked about color schemes, inquired whether Noah preferred red or white wine, as if the detail mattered enormously. I wanted to believe this was acceptance blooming late, but sincere. The day of the party arrived wrapped in early summer heat. The sky was an endless blue, cicadas humming the trees like electric wires. When we pulled into the driveway, my childhood home looked almost festive. String lights draped across the backyard. White linens fluttered gently over rented tables. The scent of grilled vegetables and rosemary chicken drifted through the air. For a moment, gratitude softened me. Maybe I had been wrong. Guests arrived in waves. My cousins laughing loudly. Family friends carrying wrapped gifts. Noah's parents, warm and gracious, their smiles unwavering. Noah moved easily among them, shaking hands, asking about jobs and gardens and grandchildren. I watched my aunt dab her eyes as she hugged me. The backyard glowed under golden light, and then the gate creaked open. I turned casually at the sound. The world narrowed instantly. Julian stepped inside like he had every right to be there. Crisp navy blazer, familiar smirk, a bottle of expensive wine in his hand. My mother was already moving toward him, her face bright with something that looked like triumph. She embraced him. The cicadas seemed to grow louder, shriller, like warning sirens. My pulse thudded in my ears. I walked toward them slowly, my steps heavy as if wading through water. "What is he doing here?" I asked, voice level but thin. My mother blinked at me, as if confused by the question. "I invited him," she said. "I thought it would be nice for everyone to reconnect." Reconnect. The word echoed grotesquely in the summer air. Julian smiled at me like this was a coincidence, like he hadn't rehearsed his entrance. "You look incredible," he said softly. I felt Noah's presence beside me then, solid and steady. "Is there a problem?" he asked. I swallowed the surge of humiliation rising in my throat. "Yes," I said. "He needs to leave." My mother's expression hardened. "Don't be dramatic," she whispered sharply. "He drove all this way." And just like that, the evening tilted. The golden light dimmed. The string lights above us flickered on, casting long shadows across faces suddenly uncertain. I realized then that this was not a spontaneous mistake. It was a move, a calculated, deliberate move in a game I hadn't known I was playing. And as I stood there between the man who had broken me once and the man who had helped me rebuild, I felt the first true tremor of something shattering, not just trust, but the illusion that my mother and I had ever wanted the same future for me. The moment stretched thin as glass, fragile and glinting under the warm glow of the string lights. The laughter that filled the backyard only minutes earlier seemed to retreat into corners, swallowed by an invisible tension that hummed like static in the air. I could smell the rosemary from the grill turning bitter as it charred unattended, smoke curling lazily upward as if unaware that something far more volatile had just ignited. Julian stood a few feet away from me, close enough that I could see the faint scar near his eyebrow, the one he'd gotten surfing years ago and used to retell as a heroic battle with the ocean. His eyes were calm, too calm, observant, calculating. He wasn't embarrassed. He wasn't surprised. He was watching. Noah's hand brushed mine, a silent question. I could feel the tension in his body, coiled and alert, like a man bracing for impact. "You didn't know?" he murmured quietly, not accusing, just needing to understand the ground beneath his feet. "No," I whispered back, And that single word carried everything: shock, betrayal, humiliation, fury. My mother's voice cut through the stillness. "Let's not make this awkward," she said lightly, though her smile had hardened at the edges. "It's a celebration." A celebration. The irony felt cruel. I stepped closer to her, lowering my voice. "You invited my ex to my engagement party." The words felt surreal even as they left my mouth. She straightened her shoulders, defensive pride flickering across her face. "He's been part of this family for years," she replied. "You don't just erase history." History? As if the lies, the late-night tears, the hollow ache in my chest during that final year with Julian were quaint footnotes in some glamorous story. I felt the air thicken, heavy with the scent of grilled meat and gardenias. Guests nearby pretended not to listen, their eyes darting nervously between us. Julian cleared his throat softly. "I didn't mean to cause trouble," he said, though his tone lacked apology. "Your mom thought it would be good for everyone to catch up." Good. The word felt contaminated. I saw then the subtle confidence in the way he stood, like someone who believed he had been invited not as a guest, but as a contender. Noah's jaw tightened. He extended a polite but distant nod toward Julian. "This doesn't feel appropriate," he said evenly. His voice wasn't raised, but it carried weight. There was strength in its calm. My mother's eyes flashed. "I don't need to lecture my own home," she snapped. "I'm simply giving my daughter space to see clearly." Space. As if my engagement were a temporary distraction from the real future she had envisioned. The cicadas seemed deafening now, their rhythmic screech underscoring the rising tension. I became acutely aware of everything. The sticky condensation sliding down a glass of lemonade on the table beside me, the way my cousin shifted awkwardly near the dessert tray, the faint crackle of charcoal burning too long. My heart hammered, so loudly I wondered if others could hear it. "There's nothing to see," I said, voice trembling despite my effort to steady it. "I'm engaged to Noah." My mother's expression shifted then, not to shame, but to something almost pitying. "Sweetheart," she began, and that word, once comforting, felt patronizing now. "Engagements can be broken. It's not a marriage yet. Sometimes we need perspective before we make permanent decisions." The words fell like stones into water, rippling outward. I saw my aunt's hand fly to her mouth. I saw Noah's brother stiffen near the fence. I saw Julian glance at me with a flicker of something triumphant, and then my mother did the unthinkable. She picked up her wine glass and tapped it lightly with a fork. The clear ringing cut through conversation like a blade. One by one, voices fell silent. 50 faces turned toward her, illuminated by soft lights and shadow. I felt suddenly exposed, like standing on a stage without knowing the script. "Thank you all for coming," she began, her tone warm, almost rehearsed. "As a mother, I've always wanted the very best of my daughter." My stomach dropped. I could feel Noah go still beside me. She spoke of love, of responsibility, of watching me grow. Her words floated gracefully at first, weaving a narrative of devotion, but beneath them pulsed something else, an agenda dressed as concern. "I have to be honest," she continued, her voice gaining firmness, "because sometimes love means speaking up even when it's uncomfortable." The backyard was silent, except for the distant hum of traffic and the faint rustle of leaves. "I don't believe Noah's the right match for her." The words landed like a physical blow. A sharp inhale rippled through the crowd. Someone dropped a fork. It clattered loudly against a plate. My vision tunneled. I could barely register her next sentences, though later they would replay in cruel clarity. She spoke of security, of compatibility, of how some connections were rare and shouldn't be discarded lightly. She mentioned Julian by name, praising the history we'd shared, the potential she still saw. She framed it as concern, as foresight, as maternal intuition. But the meaning was unmistakable. I was making a mistake, and she had invited my past to rescue me from it. I could feel heat crawling up my neck, humiliation burning beneath my skin. I wanted to disappear, to dissolve into the scent of smoke and grass and summer air. Noah stood motionless. His face had gone pale, his expression shuddered. The composure that had defined him for years now looked strained, fragile. Julian watched everything unfold with unsettling stillness, like a man observing a chessboard where he believed he held an advantage. "I'm sorry," Noah said quietly, though no one had apologized to him. He looked at me, not angry, not accusing, but wounded in a way that sliced deeper than shouting ever could. "I can't stay here." His voice was steady, but his eyes were not. And then he turned, walking toward the gate under the string lights that flickered uselessly overhead. I called his name. The word cracked in my throat. Around me, conversations erupted in hushed chaos. My sister's voice rose sharply at my mother, demanding to know what she was thinking. My father stood frozen near the patio door, his hands clenched uselessly at his sides. The scent of burned rosemary thickened, acrid and unpleasant. Everything felt distorted, surreal, like a dream slipping toward nightmare. Julian stepped closer again, lowering his voice so only I could hear. "I didn't know she was going to say all that," he murmured. "But maybe this is a sign." A sign. Rage flared through me so suddenly it shocked even myself. "Get out," I said. My voice no longer trembled. "You don't get to stand here and pretend this is fate." For the first time, uncertainty flickered in his expression. My mother's tears came quickly, but they felt performative, as if she were the one wronged by our reactions. "I'm only trying to protect you," she insisted. "One day you'll understand." But understanding had nothing to do with it. Control did. The night after the party did not end. It lingered. It followed me home like smoke clinging to fabric, settling into the walls of my apartment, into the cushions of the couch, into the silence between breaths. I didn't turn on the lights when I walked in. The place felt unfamiliar in the dark, as if the life Noah and I had built there was already dissolving into shadow. The engagement ring on my finger caught the faint glow from the street lamp outside, scattering fractured light across the ceiling. I stared at it for a long time, wondering if a promise could survive humiliation, wondering if love could survive being publicly weighed against a price tag. Noah didn't call that night. He sent one message around midnight. "I'm okay. I just need space to think." It was measured, careful, nothing like the warmth that usually filled his words. I lay awake listening to the hum of the refrigerator, the distant rumble of traffic, the ticking of the wall clock that suddenly sounded unbearably loud. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw my mother lifting that glass, heard the delicate chime that split my life into before and after. Morning came gray and heavy. The sky hung low with unspent rain, clouds swollen and unmoving. My phone buzzed relentlessly on the nightstand. My mother, 10 missed calls. 5 voicemails. A string of texts that oscillated between "I'm sorry you're upset" and "you'll thank me one day." The phrasing told me everything. She wasn't sorry for what she'd done. She was sorry I was reacting incorrectly to it. By noon, my sister Alara arrived unannounced. She let herself in with the spare key we'd given her years ago. She looked tired, her dark hair pulled into a loose knot, eyes rimmed red from what I suspected had been an argument that lasted long after I left. She didn't say hello. She just wrapped her arms around me, holding me tightly as if anchoring me to something solid. "She's lost it," she muttered into my shoulder. I don't even recognize her anymore. I wanted to argue. I wanted to offend the woman who had braided my hair before school and sat through piano recitals and packed my lunches with little notes folded inside. But the memory of her voice, firm and unapologetic as she dismantled my engagement in front of 50 people, silenced me. Alara told me our father had barely spoken that night. He'd gone quiet in the way he always did when conflict escalated beyond his control, retreating into himself like a man, weathering a storm by pretending he wasn't standing in it. My mother, meanwhile, had defended her actions with conviction that bordered on righteousness. She claimed she'd saved me from a lifetime of regret. She'd insisted that love was fleeting but stability was not. Ilara's voice trembled as she recounted it. "She talked about you like you were an investment portfolio," she said bitterly, "not a person." I spent the rest of the day drifting between anxiety and anger. I replayed every conversation I'd ever had with my mother about Noah, every subtle dig about his job, every wistful mention of Julian's success. I began to see a pattern I had ignored before. It wasn't just preference. It was strategy. On the 3rd day after the party, Noah finally agreed to meet. He chose a small botanical garden near the river, neutral ground, Not our apartment. Not the coffee shop where we had our first date. Neutral ground felt ominous. When I arrived, the air was damp from morning rain. The scent of wet soil rich and earthy. The garden paths glistened, and petals clung to leaves like fragile apologies. Noah was already there, sitting on a wooden bench beneath an arch of climbing roses. He looked exhausted. There were shadows under his eyes I had never seen before. He didn't hug me when I sat beside him. He left space between us, physical space that mirrored the emotional distance that had quietly formed. "I keep replaying it," he said without preamble. His voice was calm, but it lacked its usual warmth. The way she said your ex's name, the way everyone looked at me. He paused, staring at a droplet sliding down a leaf. I've never felt that small in my life. The word small lodged in my chest. I reached for his hand, but he hesitated before letting our fingers touch. It wasn't rejection. It was caution. "It wasn't about you," I said quickly. "It was about her obsession with money, with status." "But it was about me," he interrupted gently. "She made it about me." He exhaled slowly. "I can handle not being rich. I can handle working my way up. What I don't know if I can handle is marrying into a family where I'm seen as a downgrade." The rain-soaked air felt colder suddenly. I hadn't realized how deeply her opinion had cut him. I'd grown up with her expectations. He hadn't. "I love you," I said. "That's what matters." The words sounded insufficient even as I spoke them. He studied me carefully. "Do you?" he asked softly. Not accusing, searching. "Do you ever wonder if she's right? If you're settling?" The question wasn't cruel. It was vulnerable. It revealed his own fear, the quiet insecurity he'd carried alone for years. I shook my head immediately, but the speed of my denial betrayed something else. Guilt that I had allowed her comparisons to continue for so long without consequences. "No," I said more steadily. "I don't care about what Julian could have given me. I care about what you give me. Peace, honesty, safety." My voice broke on the last word. Noah's shoulders relaxed slightly, but the tension didn't disappear. "Then I need to know you'll protect that," he said, "because she's not going to stop, not unless you make her." The realization hit me with brutal clarity. I had spent years trying to keep the peace, smoothing over my mother's comments, convincing myself they were harmless. But harmless comments had evolved into public sabotage, and sabotage had roots. 2 days later, Alara called again. Her voice was urgent this time. "You need to hear this in person," she said. I drove to her apartment under a sky that threatened another storm. Inside, the scent of strong coffee filled the air. She sat me down at her kitchen table, sliding her phone across the surface toward me. On the screen was a photo she had taken. Screenshots of text messages between our mother and Julian's mother. They dated back 6 months. Casual at first, holiday greetings, updates, then gradually more pointed exchanges. "I think she's rushing into something. He's not right for her long term. Maybe there's still time." My breath caught as I read further. There were messages about Noah, fabricated concerns, exaggerated tensions, suggestions that I wasn't as happy as I appeared. My mother had painted a picture of doubt and vulnerability, creating an opening that hadn't existed. "She's been laying the groundwork since winter," Alara said quietly. She told Julian's mother she was worried you'd get engaged soon. My stomach twisted. The party hadn't been an impulsive mistake. It had been the culmination of months of manipulation. I drove straight to my parents' house. The sky finally broke as I pulled into the driveway, rain slamming against the windshield in violent sheets. The house looked smaller somehow, less imposing than it had in my childhood. When my mother opened the door, surprise flickered across her face, quickly replaced by cautious optimism. "You came," she said softly, as if I were the one who had been distant. "I know about the messages," I said, stepping inside without waiting to be invited. The house smelled of coffee and lemon cleaner, painfully familiar. "You've been talking to Julian." "For months." She stiffened. "I've been concerned," she replied. "There's a difference." "You told him I was unhappy," I said, my voice rising despite my effort to stay calm. "You told him there was an opening." The word tasted sour. She didn't deny it. She straightened her spine, eyes flashing with defensive conviction. I told him you seemed unsure. Because you do. You've always chased feelings instead of security. The rain battered the windows behind her, punctuating her words like applause. I'm not unsure, I said. You are. She shook her head, almost pitying. One day you'll realize love is enough. When bills pile up, when opportunities slip by, Julian could give you everything. Everything except trust, except respect. I saw it then, not just her obsession with wealth, but her own regret, the life she believed she had missed, the vacation she hadn't taken, the social circles she'd hovered near but never entered. She wasn't trying to save me. She was trying to rewrite her own history through mine. I'm not your second chance, I said quietly. The words seemed to land harder than any accusation. For a fleeting moment, uncertainty flickered in her eyes, but it vanished quickly, replaced by stubborn resolve. I'm your mother, she said. I know what's best. No, I replied. You know what you want. The rain continued long after I left. The storm outside mirrored the one unraveling inside me. When I returned home, Noah was waiting. I told him everything about the texts, the months of planning, the lies she'd fed Julian. He listened without interruption, his expression shifting from shock to something colder. So it wasn't just a party, he said quietly. It was a campaign. I nodded. Silence filled the room, the kind of silence that forces decisions. And as the rain finally softened into a steady drizzle against the windows, I realized this wasn't just about confronting my mother anymore. It was about choosing fully and without hesitation the life I wanted, and accepting that doing so might mean losing the woman who raised me. The days after I confronted my mother became a tense, fragile dance. Each morning, I woke to quiet hum of my apartment, the soft patter of rain against the window, wondering if today would be the day she would retaliate, escalate, or relent. I avoided calling her, avoided answering when she did call, and every message from her felt like a landmine. Noah stayed by my side, though the distance in his eyes hadn't fully vanished. He moved carefully around the edges of my emotions, respecting the walls I was building around my heart, yet never abandoning me. His patience became both a balm and a mirror, showing me how love can endure, even under siege. Ilara's warnings have been precise. She's not done. She'll test you in ways you can't predict. And she was right. One evening, a week after the confrontation, my mother arrived unannounced. The doorbell echoed like a gunshot in the quiet apartment. I opened the door to find her standing there, impeccably dressed, her expression schooled into serene composure. We need to talk, she said. The words themselves carried no threat. Yet every ounce of her presence was a challenge, a provocation. I let her in, deliberately closing the door behind her. The air felt charged, thick with unspoken accusations and suppressed anger. She sat on the couch, crossing her legs, hands folded in her lap, as if this were a negotiation over tea rather than years of betrayal. I've been thinking, she began, her voice honey but firm, about what you said, about how you've been hurt, and I want to make things right. I laughed softly, not humorously, but hollowly. Right? You mean by undermining me in front of everyone? By manipulating my engagement, orchestrating lies, and treating my love like commodity? My voice rose with each word, echoing against the walls that had witnessed my childhood arguments and celebrations alike. Her smile didn't falter. I see your point, she said smoothly. But sometimes people have to be guided toward the right decisions, even if they don't realize at the time. Her words hit me with a mix of disbelief and fury. This wasn't remorse. This was justification. You don't get to decide what's right for me, I said, standing now, letting my presence fill the room. I am not a reflection of your missed opportunities. I am my own person, and I will not let you manipulate my life any longer. For a moment, she simply regarded me with calm, calculating eyes. And then, unexpectedly, her demeanor shifted. She leaned forward, voice dropping, almost whispering. Do you think Noah will stay? Do you think he'll fight for you when he sees how complicated your family is? When he sees how much baggage you carry? The words were designed to pierce, to erode the foundation of trust one had tried to build with him. I felt the old insecurities clawing at me, but I refused to let them take hold. Noah and I said steadily, we built something real, something neither you nor anyone else can manipulate. You may try to interfere, but it won't work. I will not choose fear over love. I will not choose control over my own happiness. She exhaled sharply, a sound that seemed to release years of tension. You think you're strong enough to stand against me? She asked, the challenge hanging in the air like a storm cloud. I met her gaze without flinching. I'm stronger than I ever realized, I said, and I won't allow you to break me or him ever again. That evening, as she left, I felt the weight of the confrontation settle, heavy but cleansing. It wasn't a victory, not yet. It was the first time I had spoken my truth fully, without hesitation or apology. The fight wasn't over. But for the first time, I realized I had reclaimed a part of myself that had been buried under years of expectation and manipulation. The next weeks were a delicate balance of rebuilding. Noah and I spent hours talking, planning, dreaming, rediscovering the intimacy and trust that the party had almost shattered. We walked along the river at dusk, the sky a riot of purple and gold, the water reflecting our tentative hope. We laughed again, cautiously at first, then freely, as though shaking off invisible chains. Our conversations turned from practicalities to dreams, from fears to futures. Every shared memory, every whispered promise, became a testament to our resilience. Hilaire became my anchor, too, helping me navigate the murky waters of family politics. Together, we devised boundaries, laid plans for future confrontations, and reinforced my determination to remain autonomous. Through her, I saw the possibility of family loyalty without manipulation, the idea that love didn't have to be conditional or transactional. And then, one afternoon, a letter arrived, elegant, with a crisp envelope bearing my mother's handwriting. I hesitated before opening it, the past week's confrontations echoing in my mind. Inside, a single sheet of paper, carefully written. I realize now that my methods were flawed. I wanted the best for you, and I see that in trying to control outcomes, I lost sight of your happiness. I hope someday you can forgive me, even if you cannot forget. Love, Mother. The words were both balm and sting. Forgiveness felt far off, yet acknowledgement mattered. It was a step, however small, toward recalibration, toward understanding that relationships, even fractured ones, could evolve. I read the letter again. The ink smudged slightly from the rain and felt a quiet determination. I would protect my love, my autonomy, and my life, no matter the cost. That night, Noah came over, and we sat together, watching the city lights flicker in the distance. My engagement ring glinted in the soft lamplight. We're going to be okay, he said, voice low and steady. I leaned into him, feeling the solidity of his presence, the reality of our bond. We will, I whispered, but deep inside, I knew it wasn't just about surviving my mother's interference. It was about thriving despite it, about claiming joy and love on my own terms, about refusing to let the past dictate the narrative of our future. The battle lines were drawn, but I had found my strength, and for the first time, I truly believed that nothing, neither manipulation nor expectation nor fear, could strip away what we had built together. The months leading up to the wedding became a careful, deliberate act of reclaiming our lives. Noah and I decided on an intimate ceremony. No 50-person backyard extravaganzas. No dangling expectations of family approval. Just us, our closest friends, and the quiet warmth of people who wanted nothing but to witness our joy. Planning became a shared ritual, each decision a stitch weaving together a life built on love rather than obligation. I discovered a satisfaction I hadn't known in years. Freedom in choice, the power to say yes to what I truly wanted. Our apartment became a hub of soft laughter and occasional chaos. Wedding magazines scattered across the coffee table. The aroma of fresh flowers filling the space as we argued, playfully, over centerpieces and table linens. But peace, even fragile, did not come without challenge. My mother continued her barrage of messages, texts, voicemails, even the occasional unexpected knock at the door. Each intrusion tested my resolve, stirring old fears and insecurities. Yet, each time I felt that pull, I reminded myself of the engagement party. The humiliation, the betrayal, the months of secret plotting. Those memories became my compass, guiding me toward boundaries I refused to compromise. I no longer flinched. I responded with clarity, firmness, and detachment. No excuses. No explanations beyond what I chose to give. For the first time, I was practicing the art of emotional self-defense. One crisp morning in early November, I received an email, not from my mother, not from Chris, but from a distant cousin who had been at the engagement party. They wrote with quiet urgency, detailing how some relatives had tried to intervene after the chaos of that day, but were shut down by my mother's forceful assertions. The note reminded me that while I had the right to control my life, others had witnessed the impact of her actions firsthand. I realized the consequences of my mother's interference were not just private. They rippled outward, affecting friends and family in ways I hadn't anticipated. This reinforced my resolve to maintain control over my narrative, to protect Noah, and to ensure our union wasn't overshadowed by toxic interference. The wedding day arrived like a soft sunrise over a quiet sea. The air was cool, crisp, and fragrant with autumn leaves, mingling with the delicate scent of roses and peonies carefully arranged along the aisle. Our friends and immediate family gathered, faces glowing with genuine happiness, eyes reflecting the intimacy and sincerity of the moment. Noah looked at me as he always did, steady, unwavering, completely present, and I felt an overwhelming sense of rightness. The past months of fear, anger, and confrontation crystallized into a single truth. We were choosing each other, and nothing could undo that. When I walked down the aisle, I noticed the absence of my mother more than anything. It was sharp, almost painful, but the emptiness was also a testament to my own agency. Every step forward was a declaration. My life, my choices, my love, not hers to manipulate. I caught glimpses of Jada's supportive smile, my father's hesitant yet proud nod, and the calm, unflinching gaze of Noah's parents, who had quietly become our anchors in a storm of familial chaos. The ceremony unfolded in soft music and hushed vows, our words deliberate, heartfelt, sealing promises made in defiance of outside interference. After the ceremony, we celebrated quietly. The reception was intimate but alive with joy, the gentle clinking of glasses, laughter echoing beneath strings of fairy lights, the faint crackle of a small fire pit sending warmth and flickering shadows across faces illuminated by genuine affection. Stories were shared, toasts given, and each moment was a reclamation of happiness that had been almost stolen from us. We danced under the night sky, the crisp air carrying our laughter, the stars bearing witness to a love unbroken and fiercely defended. Weeks later, after the echoes of wedding celebrations had faded, I confronted the lingering weight of my mother's absence. I realized that forgiving her might never mean inviting her back into my life fully. It might only mean acknowledging complexity of her choices, while refusing to allow them power over mine. I wrote letters I never sent, not as attempts at reconciliation, but as a way to release the grip of resentment and articulate my boundaries clearly. These letters, folded and placed in a drawer, were a quiet ceremony of self-assertion. Noah and I moved forward, building a life that reflected our values and aspirations. We debated decorating choices for our first apartment as a married couple, shared morning coffees in comfortable silence, and discovered joy in routines and rituals uniquely ours. Each day reaffirmed the lesson that love required vigilance, not in doubt of each other, but in protecting the bond from forces that sought to distort it. Occasionally, memories of my mother's actions would surface, sharp and bitter, but they no longer dictated my emotions. I had learned to carry them, without letting them define the present. Chris faded from memory, no longer a looming shadow, reduced to the lessons he inadvertently taught me. Trust carefully, value authenticity, and recognize when a person's affection is conditional or manipulative. By the time the first anniversary of our wedding arrived, the apartment was filled with soft light, laughter, and the quiet affirmation of family we had created through choice rather than obligation. Noah held my hand, squeezing gently, a silent acknowledgement that together we had weathered storms, confronted impossible choices, and emerged resilient. We toasted quietly, the city skyline glowing beyond our window, a testament to autonomy, love, and survival. In the end, I understood that the battle wasn't just with my mother or the echoes of cheating ex. It was with the ingrained expectations, the inherited pressures, and the fear of asserting one's self-worth. I had chosen love on my own terms, fiercely and unapologetically. And in that choice, I discovered freedom, strength, and the undeniable truth that sometimes the most courageous act of love is protecting from those who claim to know what's best. We had emerged victorious, not through avoidance, not through compromise with those who refuse to respect us, but through unwavering commitment to each other. And as the night settled and the city hummed softly below, I felt the full, quiet power of a life claimed, a love defended, and a future built entirely by our own hands.